So in this part of the tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to colorize or render your outlines. So you're going to have something that looks like this image on the left, and I'm going to show you how to turn it into something like the image on the right here. So we're going to talk through things like color and texture and shadows. Okay, so before we get to that, I know that a few of you had questions on the layout and features available to you when you open Illustrator. We're all probably using different versions of Illustrator. Some of us are on Macs, some of us are on PCs. It's going to look different for everybody. So that, don't worry if yours doesn't look like this, that's okay. I'll show you how to access these tools though. So I talked through tools like Pathfinder and Stroke and color and appearance and layers. All of these little windows are all available in the Windows toolbar. So if you click that, you can kind of turn on and off all of these windows as you see fit. If you're totally lost and everything looks completely different, I always like to just check to see how you have your workspace set up. So also under Windows, if you look up workspace, I like to have it under automation, because what that helps me do is it helps me have all the tools available for just like grinding out drawings on Illustrator. If you see this, I change. I'm changing from my workspace to like tracing. Things change. I get different features. I like to keep it simple and use automation. If you get more advanced, you can even start customizing your workspace and saving a workspace. As you use different tools, you'll maybe want to do that. I don't use Illustrator enough to maybe justify that for me, but maybe some of you will. Okay, so I hope that answers some of your like layout and questions for Illustrator. Okay. Yeah, this is the 2020 version of the software, 2022 version of the software. I have the Adobe Cloud Suite, and they just keep it up to date automatically for me. It's a little expensive. This is just the way it is though in design. Okay, so let's colorize and render some of this stuff now. So I've just gone ahead and drawn some more features that we can start to color. It's really quite simple, actually. You just select the object that you want to color. As you can see, this is a box here. It already has a stroke of 1 point. And you can see there's a line here through a white box. That means it's transparent. I'm just going to change that to another color. Let's just change it to like a gray color. Just like that. This is blue because it's a fountain full of water. So I'm just going to change that to like a light blue color like that. Really simple. This feature here, as you can see, there's multiple features selected, right? These little dots plus the outline. So I know this is a group. I double click that group and I select only one feature that I want to have selected, colorized. And I apply kind of green to that. And as you can see, that's transparent. That's because I already preset that to transparent. There's this other feature here. If you go to appearance, because it already knows it's transparent, its opacity is set to 33. If you don't have that open yet, there's this window called transparency that you can open up, and you can change the transparency of that image. Okay, so let's actually, before we confuse ourselves too much, let's delete the opacity that I have here. Delete. Whoops, sorry, let me get it back. Let's just start from scratch and delete this opacity. So it's a solid image now, right? If I go to transparency, I can change the transparency down to something a little less. See that? Now this does two things, right? It changes the transparency of the content and the whole, everything here, including the stroke and the fill. If I want to just change the transparency of the fill, but not the stroke. There's a couple ways to do that. I can click opacity under appearance here and change the opacity there to be lighter, and that doesn't change the opacity of the stroke, right? So in your drawings, that's probably something, a look you're trying to achieve. Okay, so we've talked about, you can't see the paving pattern continue underneath, whereas you can for these transparent trees here. Okay, so that's that. The other thing I'm going to show you how to do while we're here is shadows, because trees are elevated in the canopy. They're a little bit higher up, which means they're going to be casting a shadow. So you want to give the effect of a shadow. This isn't necessarily like a shadow study, and you're not going to see exactly where the sun hits and where the shadows are going to fall in this case, but you just want to give it an effect of shadow. So you type effect, you click effect up here. You go to I always get confused which one it's under. You go to, just give me a sec. It's under one of these ones. Let's just go through them all. Here, it's under stylize, drop shadow. Let's click drop shadow. And then you can specify parameters for the shadow. For example, if you want to make shadow that's really dark, you hit opacity as just, you can play around with these numbers. Opacity 0 means, it's basically clear. Opacity 100 means it's as dark as you can make it. And it's even less dark than it could be because I have the fill of this opacity, the opacity of this fill as being 80%. So if I make that higher, then the shadow turns darker too. So does that make sense? I think so.
That's great.
So you can play with shadows that way. There's another feature in shadows which you can change too. If you do want to start to play with the angles of the shadows, if you under appearance, because the shadow is already applied to this object, if you hit drop shadow, you can edit these parameters and you can kind of offset in the X and Y direction where you want these shadows to appear. I'm going to just lighten them up a little bit. And I'm just going to decrease the direction in which they're casting on the ground. So you can play with the direction of the shadows too. Okay, so now we talked about shadows, transparency, color. Let's now talk about texture. So as you can see, some of these images here, I've applied a texture to, and these are just really simple textures. I'm going to show you how to do some of that, but again, I caution you a little bit on how much texture you want to apply, because sometimes in people's drawings, the texture becomes dominant and you lose the feeling for the space because all you're looking at is the texture. So if you start to use these things, make sure they're adding value to your drawing, not taking value away. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to add texture to, let's just choose this box in the middle. Let's add first a color to it. Let's just make it like a light beige. And then let's go into effect and choose texture and choose grain. And what this lets you do is it lets you kind of add like a graininess to it, which I think makes it feel a little bit more natural, but you have to make sure you just don't go overboard with the graininess. Something like that I think looks a little bit better. It just adds slightly more depth to that shape. If it was just a flat color, it would look very artificial. Depending on the resolution of your screen, you might not be able to see this. Depending on the resolution of the printer, it might not be worthwhile. And then the other thing you have to think about is the more texture you add to your drawings and the more shadows you add to your drawings, the bigger your file size is going to be. So remember, we're asking for a file size of less than 20 megabytes. So just be cognizant. If you're adding all these things, you're going to increase your file size. So you know where to cut if your file size is too large. Okay, now I'll show you one more texture that you can add, which is a texture kind of like the one here on the right. So click the object you want to add the texture to, go to effects, go to texture, and click, let's click the cracking one. Click that. Again, I changed the spacing to be something quite small, so it's not super obvious. And I changed the crack depth is also quite small, so it's not that obvious. And I hit OK, and there you go. You have your cracking effect. So that's pretty straightforward. The other thing that might happen to you is you might be applying a crack effect to your whole object here, which includes the border. If you want to apply a crack effect to only the fill, make sure that the effect is only under fill here. If it could be applying to the whole thing too, which is a little bit annoying because you want to make sure you still have your clean line around the outside. So again, these are just simple ways to add texture and depth and feeling to your drawings. I think that was it for color and texture and fill. Was there anything else you think I should be doing? Let's just create a new object here. Yeah, okay, so you can, there's these like different brush strokes you can apply to your swatches, sorry, your strokes, right? You have to be a little bit careful because they can start to get really like kitschy. So there are these like things you can do to the stroke like that. And then there are things you can do to the inside too. How do I access these? I don't typically add.
Matt, if you go to the library, that's the right, that's at the bottom left icon.
Bottom left icon.
Yeah, and then you will see like these patterns there. If you go up, or any of these categories, yeah, you'll find a lot of texture and patterns there.
Yeah, okay, that's where it was. Okay, yeah, you can add things like that. Again, be careful though, because you can overdo it really easily. So just try and make it just light as possible. You can also start to create your own patterns and swatches too. And there's a lot of YouTube tutorials on how to do that. It's actually quite simple to do, and you can save it if you want to create, for example, if you want to create like grass, the symbol for grass kind of looks like this. Whoops, of course my swatch is not nice. I'm just going to draw, like you can kind of create symbols, the symbols for grass. If you want to multiply this over a space, you can create a pattern based on this drawing you have here, and then apply it to the fill of any object you have. Does that make sense?
Any resources out there, you can also add patterns. There's some people out there that they're offering, free patterns that you can use. You can like simply import them here. So I would recommend you guys go online, do a little bit of research, and it's just like very easy to follow. And then you'll figure out how to use the patterns.
Yeah. So as you can see, you can start to, if there are patterns outside of this list here you download online, you can just select the folder where you have it downloaded or bring it into a folder, and then you're able to access the pattern that way too.